The bro pod is back. Aaron Lutzi, how's it going, buddy?
Another day living the dream. Here we are.
Just the two of us this week. So back to basics here on Second Nature. And we figured we'd pick up where we left off in last Friday's pod that we did with Steve Holmberg. One of the final things we talked about was your operating philosophy of what got you here won't get you there. Set things up for us, Aaron.
I am in this phase right now where I'm talking to a lot of people, really trying to figure out the playbook. And I think for both of us, the playbook just continues to change because, to be fair, not a lot of people have done what we're doing when it comes to creating content in sports, trying to figure out, are we athletes? Are we media companies? What is the business of what we're doing? And I'm taking advice, input, and just anything I can get inspiration from everybody to try to like find our path through this. And I think you and I are sort of on parallel paths. And in some cases, you're ahead of me in certain areas. In other cases, I'm trying out other stuff. Everything is kind of test and learn when it comes to this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we always share with each other when we talk on the phone. And I think today's pod could be a little bit of that. I've come up with some ideas that I want to share with you for Free Trail, and maybe you can kick some ideas my way. But maybe this is like our giant galaxy brain session for the week.
This is the galaxy brain for our respective businesses. So, but to add a finer point to it, I mean, what got you here won't get you there. It's, I think, illustrative of the fact that everything is always changing in life. You never arrive anywhere. It's the infinite game. Another thing that you and I talk about all the time privately in a great book for the Second Nature Book Club. But the whole, I guess, vision for this episode is to talk about where we are personally with our businesses, to support each other in our respective journeys as creators and entrepreneurs, to give each other ideas about where we might be able to improve, get better, and to be open with the audience. And I guess we should say, as you referenced, you and I literally talk about this stuff on the phone multiple times almost every single day. So we're going to do it publicly here too. And I think we're probably going to, at the end of things, sort of come around and talk about the same stuff as it relates to Second Nature. So we'll talk
Yep.
about Super Rider, Freetrail, and Second Nature, all under this framework of what got you here won't get you there. This shit is a roller coaster for all of us. So it's good to acknowledge what we've achieved while also being honest about our current challenges and the things that are holding us back. And hopefully, this is helpful for people in the Second Nature audience who are building things in the outdoor space.
I'd love to put a little bit more detail on the Infinite Game for the people who haven't read that book yet, because it is an amazing book. And I think it's a key thing for this discussion. And I've had some really great chats about sort of the similar theme, but the Infinite Game is a Simon Sinek book. And the basic thesis is, what decisions would you make if you were not going to have an exit at any point from the thing that you were doing? And how might you make decisions that are, to be fair, a bit more sustainable than if you were just doing it all for growth, right? And whenever we're working on a project, you can get down that rabbit hole of like, I just got to get to this point. I just have to get this done. I just have to get this out. And that runs counter to the concept of the infinite game. How would you make decisions? How would you set things up? How would you operate your business if it was only just to continue doing what you're doing because what you were doing is fun? I don't know about you, but I really felt that at Red Bull, where they were not making decisions to get an immediate result, but they were just constantly laying groundwork so that they could keep doing more things. And I really felt that a lot when I moved into other businesses, that people were chasing after a specific outcome, where Red Bull was just like, we've been doing it this way for a really long time, and we've just done the right thing with intention and made the right call because it felt like the right long-term decision, and we're going to continue doing that because, well, it's working so far.
Yeah, and the cruel reality of that too is that if you are optimizing for an exit for a finite game, so to speak, you probably hamstring your ability to actually achieve that exit. Maybe to build on this infinite game metaphor with a practical example, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot recently is that 12 or 18 months ago with Freetrail, we had existential problems. Like we weren't sure if we were going to survive another 6 months. And now we have emerged from that, existential and very difficult period of the business, but we still have a lot of problems. And so one of the things I've been thinking about is that the problems never go away. They just change. You never arrive. Even if we have better problems now, there are still problems. So it's all about finding peace in this infinite game of business in the outdoor space. So with that set up, let's start with Super Rider, buddy. And
Oh,
I feel
okay.
like with this what got you here won't get you there idea, maybe it's best to just establish where are you now?
Okay, so Super Rider, I do feel like I've kind of crossed over a threshold recently. And up until this point, I've just been putting out as much algorithmically friendly content as I possibly could to build an audience. And I've used all the tricks in the book ultimately to get as many people to be aware of Super Rider as I possibly could. And that was the goal, to cross 100K on YouTube. Can I get 100,000 people to subscribe to the channel? Because for me, that's a sign that I've earned and helped build a community of people who care about the same thing that I care about, that want to learn. And I've used that as sort of a testing ground of what are people looking for? How can I become even more effective? Every video I always say is an employee, and you can have good and bad employees, but the job of each employee is to bring people back to the channel. And so I've been fine tuning and learning and developing this process over the last 4 or 5 years of how I do that. And that was the top of the funnel for me. All right, what do I need to do to first establish the top of the funnel, get people here? And then what's the next thing in the funnel? Sponsorship. So that's where I am in the journey right now. I'm starting to get sponsored because I've successfully developed the top of the funnel. And so we got that figured out, or we're tracking toward that direction. And then the bottom of the funnel is still, it's still kind of empty at this point. It's kind of the underpants gnomes problem from South Park, where it's like, I don't know if you've seen this episode, but basically they have a plan where step one is they steal everyone's underwear. Step two, step three is profit. And
Get rich.
right. And
Yeah.
in the episode they're like, but wait, what's step two? And they're like, step two, step three, profit. And I think that a lot of people go down that same path when they're like, I'm just gonna make content and step three, profit. And I'm guilty of that. And again, like you said, we start down these paths, and I think, you do test yourself. You do have to figure this stuff out. You do have to develop a skill when it comes to content creation before you can do the next thing. But you also have to have a vision of what that next thing is going to be. And I think I'm just now kind of coming to that realization of, like, it's not enough just to make content. You can make some money on it, but you can't make all the money on it. And that's a dangerous position to be in when everything is just built off of only one pillar,
Yeah,
right?
it's
And
almost impossible to make a career off of it, and as we've talked about a number of times on the podcast, you did indeed leave a very comfortable corporate job in order to pursue this life. If you had to evaluate yourself based on where you are now, what do you think you've done very well before we get to the stuff that maybe you can improve?
I think that I'm actually much, much better at actually creating content and also developing it in a way that reaches the intended audience, which is not a small feat. Being able to put together a concept, execute on the concept, and then package it in a way that tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people are going to look at, that is a skill that you can be the best bike rider in the world. You don't have that.
Yeah.
That is something that takes a long time. And the good news is that that transfers. Like, if I sat down with the Free Trail team and wanted to help you do the exact same thing with your YouTube channel, I could do that. Any brand, any business, any whatever. I have this really defined skill set for both long and short form content that I understand, and it absolutely works. So I
That was
was
one of the things I was gonna say. If I were gonna be evaluating you, one of the things that you're really great at is educating yourself. So it wasn't as if you just somebody airdropped this knowledge into your brain as to how to build the audience. You
mhm.
sought that information out, you figured out the blueprint, the playbook, and then you implemented it and executed it really, really well.
Thanks. Yeah, I think a lot of what I've been doing is test and learn. And I've really tried to approach as many different opportunities as I possibly could. One example of that is Substack. So I've got the newsletter that I built out. This next Monday will be the 1 year anniversary of the newsletter. And I've gone from zero. Actually, I started with 60 subscribers because I think I just had like a box clicked on my merch page or whatever where I collected emails. But
Yeah.
I started with 60 emails and I have, I think, 2,800 emails on my newsletter right now with a 45% open rate, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
And that is now an asset in the portfolio that I didn't have a year ago. And that came from doing the research, trying to figure out what are the things that I need to offer and then I need to have in my kit as I grow, and a direct line to the audience that's not algorithmically weighted was an important part. And that's why I have a newsletter now.
Yeah.
And so this whole time I've been building out these different platforms. I built Instagram over the last year. I went from 3,000 to 70,000. So I've just like raised all the platforms up to be in a stable place where now when I have a conversation with a potential partner, I have something to offer back to them. Right.
Yeah. What else? Or do you want me to give you my evaluation of what you did? You've done
Um,
very well.
Oh, yeah, go ahead and say nice things about me. That's great.
So, I mean, I just view you as a voracious learner in all things, that being one example. But of course, you also inhale books at a rapid speed, always with the motivation of bettering yourself. I think that's one of the key things to what makes Lutzy Lutzy. You've been incredibly consistent too. Like you said, 1 year of the newsletter. That's crazy. I remember when you sent the first one, and your boy's always giving you opens and clicks,
Thank you.
obviously. So, second nature rights, go check out Super Rider over there on Substack. And dude, you're just like a machine with audience growth. I mean, you've already said this, but just in terms of that's a skill, right? And yeah, it does have a blueprint behind it where you have a strategy and you're executing it. It's not just something where your instincts are driving things forward. I'm sure there's some stuff that's just intuition where or you're following some desire that ends up being felt by the audience that then comes down funnel into things like followers and subscribers, etc. And also the brand, man. Super Rider. Like it's catchy, it's good. And that's one of the major learnings for me in my journey too, is like honestly, as maybe cheesy as it sounds, brand is very important. You and I had lunch one day when you arrived on the Super Rider brand
That's
and
right.
ultimately went to get some design help from our buddy Johnny Bertram, who came up with the Super Rider logo lockup. But all those things create the foundation for what is the business, right? So those are all things that you've done super, super well. But admittedly, it is just the basics, right? That
Yep.
doesn't get you anywhere. So now with these, we've established where are you now? What do you need to do better to get to the next level?
Oh man, the list is long. And this whole thing is just it's a journey, right? And I feel like, I had this chat with my buddy Riley the other day and he was like, what are the things that you would be underpaid for and what are the things that you would be overpaid or that you would need to be overpaid to do? And I think this is the balance that you have to find with this whole thing of like, there are certain things that I now need to do to be able to earn money as a content creator, as a professional mountain biker. And there are things that I really want to do. And I need to basically find the balance of those two things. For example, I don't necessarily love making UGC content that's going to be used in paid and growth ads, but probably that's an element of the business that I could absolutely crush because I'm, like we've established, pretty good at making short form content. There is a voracious appetite for short form content that can be used as Instagram ads, as short form platforms, TikTok, whatever. Right?
So, meaning you would be shooting content that would live on the accounts of your partners, and
Yes.
they'd effectively be paying you to use their product in that
Yeah.
content.
Like, I could probably just build a business doing only that, but again, like, I would need to be overpaid to do that because it's not something I want to do. What I
Mm,
want to do is ride my bike and, occasionally film. What I want to do is go on cross country road trips with my son. And so you have to find this, like, balance between those 2 things. And I also think everything that we've talked about so far is, like, you have to do this stuff with intention. You have to do the right thing. And I have to be really careful, I think, about actually not overshooting my targets for stuff, like flying too close to the sun and just nuking myself making all this paid content and not doing the stuff that makes me credible to the audience, not doing stuff that makes me the reason why people tune in and watch the stuff in the first place and engage with the content that I am creating. So I think it's a really important balance. And I think that's probably the hardest thing to do is not burn yourself out making stuff for other people, not burn yourself chasing, a crazy revenue number, but just like balance it out in a meaningful way. I
mm,
think that the thing that I also need to do as I'm talking to these brands is maintain the side of things, and I think this is something we'll talk about with free trail as well, but how do you stay sort of in the athlete bucket? Because again, going into that paid ad bucket, it's a different set of numbers that you need to hit. It's a different set of requirements that they're looking for. And if I can maintain that foot in the athlete world and be in that bucket, it's a maybe safer place to be than being in, like we're here for consumer acquisition cost and you got to hit XYZ number to satisfy our growth ad stuff that you're going to make for X brand or whatever.
sore
Uh,
subject, Lucy.
Sorry. But that is the business that I could absolutely build, but also like you have to balance it out, right?
Yeah,
And so like even though making content and getting YouTube AdSense isn't going to pay all the bills, it's going to fulfill me and it's going to be meaningful to the audience and it's going to be valuable to the audience. And
yeah.
so getting that right is going to be probably the hardest needle to thread in the next year.
All right. Do you want me to give you some of the things that
Yeah,
I
I
think
got my
about?
notebook. I'm ready to go.
So these are more, I think, like higher level ideas. Like, I don't have any specific tactical advice, and my guess is that's the type of advice you're going to provide me on free trail stuff. But higher level, I mean, as I look at my business compared to your business, I think one of the things that I have benefited from is the fact that I have partners on it and you're totally solo.
Mhm.
And thinking about ways that you could identify a partner who has similar personality, similar passion and taste, but a very different skill set. So, to use the example from our business, one of the things that really took us from a simple, basic, irregular podcast to where we are now was when I met my creative partner, Ryan Thrower, who operates as our sort of creative director on all things artistic, photo, video, podcast editing, even like graphic design stuff. All of those things I'm completely incompetent with. What I'm good at is like forward facing things, talking, coming up with ideas, creating some of the content, being in front of the camera, I guess you would say.
Mhm.
And Ryan is an absolute assassin on the back end. And we should say he produces this podcast also. So that's something that, from my perspective, I feel like having a partner, you would have somebody to share the load and the emotional burden of building something from the ground up with you, but also practically you have another set of hands to actually take some of the work off of your plate.
Yeah.
What that person would look like, because you don't have as many holes in your skill set as I do, right? Because you are good in front of the camera and behind the camera. So I don't know what that person would look like. Maybe it's somebody who's more of a salesperson who has, I mean, you obviously have connections in the bike industry too, but maybe somebody who could just go out and source deals for you and then hold a camera for you in the times that you need it and maybe do some of that editing work that's really time intensive. So that would be number one for me if I were you, is like, who's the partner I could bring in almost as a co-founder, even though you've established this platform and foundation for yourself who could play a number 2 role for you.
This is something that Eric Lagerstrom and I talked about a while ago on the podcast, where we have the curse of knowledge, and bringing in someone to edit, I know if they're good or bad instantly. I know where they're starting from, and are they going to be able to pick up where I left off, or any of these different things. I think that's a real challenge for most creators out there, or people who are athletes trying to build up their content game. It's finding that person that's free to kind of jump in, and I mean, you found Ryan at like the perfect time,
Yeah. That was a miracle.
Yeah.
The universe brought us together at the right time.
Well, and it's tough, right? Like, if it just to be real about the whole thing, if I find somebody who's amazing at editing YouTube videos, I would be shocked if they weren't already making their own and they already had their own platform. Like,
Yeah.
they could have 100,000 subscribers of their own. And so finding the right person who's down to do what I do, and but like put me in front of the thing instead of them. That's a rare person, and they have
Yep.
to like mountain biking, and they have to, like, again, we're not monetized really in a meaningful way yet. So they're gonna have to take a flyer on me too. This is the challenge that everybody in
Yep.
this space, I think, kind of runs into, of like, yeah, I would love to have a person shooting and editing, but like I'm barely making money on it right now. So how do I pay them?
All right,
And
that leads me perfectly to the next thing
all
because
right.
that's the fucking reality. Excuse my language. Like, and this is something I certainly have learned the hard way. Like, at some point, you have to take a big risk.
Mm,
And for example, I shoveled the vast majority of my life savings into Freetrail, and we are only barely starting to emerge from that. But like, it was a big risk, and it seems to be paying off. And
mm.
so, if you were to bring somebody else in, it probably would require you to give up a piece of the business and also pay that person some kind of a salary, even if you can justify a reduced salary based on aligning incentives to build for the future. And there's nobody to pay that salary except for you and your savings,
Yeah.
right? While we're in this mode of being under monetized. And
Right.
that is the reality for everybody, right? If you are bootstrapping a business, you are going to have to make that type of a sacrifice. And if you're raising money and trying to build a business that way, there's obviously some some compromises you have to make if you have investors too. So one way or another, you're giving something up, and you just have to pick and choose what the right thing to give up is.
I love the idea of owning it like Oprah, where you
Yeah.
just like you own 100% of it, and you just take the leap and make it happen. I had a conversation.
But let's be honest, it's then very hard to find a partner who is like, let's go shoulder to shoulder to battle for the 10 years it's going to take to build this thing together
Yeah,
if they're not
absolutely.
owners too.
Yep. I had another conversation this past week with someone. I forget if I told you about this, but basically they were saying, like, what if you found 10 strategic partners, people who had connections in areas that you wanted to expand. Maybe somebody is from the bike industry and is a strategic partner, but what if it was somebody in e-commerce? What if it was somebody in production? What if it was somebody in TV film, and you brought them in at like $10,000? So like, for them, probably not that big of a deal, but the value of having 10 people that were super connected and could be the cheat code to open up doors for you would be well worth giving away part of your business to get that exchange. And because those people have now invested in you, they're also not only opening the door, but they're intentionally making this thing happen for you because they want to get that return. Meanwhile, that 100K could get you, somebody doing sales, could get you a filmer, an editor, a logistics person, whatever you needed to build out the business.
Yeah.
But again, then you lose a chunk of your business in the process. This is like, I feel like I'm on the precipice right now. Can I
My feeling
bootstrap
is you
it?
don't need people to open doors for you. I mean, you are the door opener. So,
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I
but
mean,
you know best. And this is another funny thing, like I have a few people who I reach out to for advice on business stuff all the time. And inherently, because they're not in the weeds like I am every single day, you come away from those conversations, even if they give you what is thoughtful advice, sometimes you just don't feel like it's right, and
Right.
because you are in the weeds and you know best. So, anyway, all right, so I have some other stuff here, okay? So basically as I look at Super Rider, the main problem, if you want to call it that, is that monetization hasn't matched the growth of the audience yet. And that obviously should take time to catch up, but the audience is there. Like you have a huge audience across platforms, especially YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, which are the most important platforms out there, right?
Mhm.
So then it's like, how do we turn that audience into monetization, right? And to me, in media, there's only a couple ways to make money reliably: ads and subscription, and then maybe some type of commerce, right? So, as we've talked about, what is the bottom of the funnel? If we talk about ads, I think when you look at those different mediums, probably the best place to secure advertising revenue are places where you're less active. Like you don't have a podcast. And I know brands are really into advertising on podcasts now because there's that trust, that parasocial relationship, they call it. You're in their ears. And so it's in all likelihood leading to higher conversion rates with an audience. So maybe something you need to look at is start the Super Rider podcast. We already talked about the newsletter. It seems like the foundation is established there. So how do we hit the gas pedal on that? Go from 2,800 subscribers to 28,000. I
Yeah.
mean, you're the guy who's got that playbook, but there's no reason why, with the number of mountain bikers in the world, you couldn't be the number one mountain biking newsletter. Newsletters also monetize much better than YouTube AdSense, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then, if your newsletter does really take off, you could introduce, because it's on Substack, the subscription version of it. And what I was thinking for this, Aaron, would be more of like a B2B thing, even if it cannibalizes a little bit of our second nature content. You could be writing like a business of bikes thing, as somebody who's been in the space forever with multiple different roles as a professional athlete, and then on the sports marketing side and as a creator. So you could provide a very informed perspective that people would probably want to pay for. It would require a lot more work and different kind of work of researching things and developing relationships and kind of acting more like a reporter, almost like a journalist, I feel like.
Mhm.
But I think just like having maybe a paid tier of that newsletter that was more industry focused, that might be interesting. So anyway, a couple ideas from me there. Also, we've talked about in the past the whole what is the business philosophy. We've talked about courses and education. I don't think we need to go too deep into it, but that's kind of the mission of the channel.
Yeah.
And then as I look at your business versus mine, we have our community thing too. Obviously, we just started the Second Nature Slack group. That's been awesome, by the way. And I know
Yeah.
you had like a Discord for a bit. You were on Twitch for a little while. So
Yeah.
maybe give us an update on that and just sort of the community part of it.
So Discord is still going strong, and it's interesting when you have. I mean, I think our Slack and my Discord for Super Rider are very similar in that once you have enough people in there, it kind of runs itself, and you
Network
don't.
effects.
Yeah, you don't have to necessarily be boosting, every discussion. You can just everybody just connects and has conversations, and there will be power users that are posting regularly. There will be people who, you know, are in there reading stuff, and you just come in there every now and then and add some value where you can, and it kind of it is a community, and then you start figuring out ways to do special kind of one-off things here and there. uh as far as Twitch goes, that was something that I tested when I first got the warehouse, and I was going in there to film anyway for my videos. So it just made sense for me to actually turn on a live stream and ride with the live stream. It never really took off because the easiest way to grow on Twitch is to grow on YouTube first. That's kind of the line. And I did get people that did come in, and the people who did were super locked in. At the very end of my live streaming career, I actually switched over to YouTube Live, and that was way more successful because again, it's a built-in audience, and they were just there for it, and it was basically the same offering, whether it was Twitch or YouTube.
Yep.
Twitch is such a gaming heavy platform, and they're sort of expanding, but it's mostly like 99% gamers doing their thing. So it's a little bit easier to grow on
Yeah.
there. If you're
So there's
doing,
not like an audience really that's looking for live mountain biking tutorials.
yeah.
Yeah.
And, same thing with Discord. I don't think a lot of people in the outdoor or mountain bike space are using Discord that frequently. If they happen to be a gamer, they might be using it, but there aren't a lot of people using Discord for their day job, whereas Slack is a little bit more common. So I think that's why we're seeing so many people show up in Slack. I feel like maybe we should just like read off some of the introductions on a future pod or something like that.
So
Like there's
baller.
so many awesome people in the Second Nature Slack.
I mean, I've already had a handful of like really valuable connections and calls from it.
Yeah, yeah, it's
So
amazing. And
somebody DM me today about how we could do a lot better to have people who visit freetrail.com convert to newsletter subscribers. Like that
that's
happened in the
cool.
Second Nature Slack today. So dope.
Yeah, it's a absolute. I mean, everybody in there, you read through those introductions and it's crazy. Like
Yeah.
there's legit people that are listening to this podcast. So thanks
Hell yeah.
everyone. Yeah, I don't know. The community side of things has definitely been growing, and I want to make sure that whatever I'm doing moving forward is congruent to where I have been so far. I feel like if you make a really sharp turn, you start to lose people. So how do I start to really think about moving forward? I've taught people how to ride bikes in a sort of different way, and I think that what I'm going to continue doing is try to expand and do sort of adjacent things like, okay, now that you can ride, here's where you should ride. Makes it's not a hard pivot basically.
Yeah.
The road trip video that I'm putting out right now, I'm doing that whole series, has been really well received by the audience because I'm not just on a road trip by myself. I'm teaching somebody how to ride mountain bikes in real life. And there's a father son story and everything else. But at the core of it, it's still education and people are still learning stuff from the content I'm making. So how do I keep that line in there? And I think that's really the essence of everything we're talking about is how can you stay focused on doing the most good, but in the most efficient way?
The
And if
minimum effective dose in
yeah,
endurance sport
like
lexicon.
I love the idea of a super rider podcast, but also as we know, doing podcasts is a ton of work. And I'm
Tell me
happy
about it.
and also like I don't know if that's congruent at this point with what my audience expects from me, you know?
Right. But it monetizes
Yeah.
and maybe there's a new audience. I mean,
Yeah.
people are probably listening to things while they're out practicing and riding mountain bikes.
Yeah, definitely an
Hey,
option.
one other thing, and feel free to continue going on, but I think it's important to talk about as we build our businesses, we also have to up level ourselves, right?
Mhm.
So if there's anything as part of your personal toolbox or even on a psychological emotional level where you feel like you need to improve Aaron Lutzi the person
Hmm.
and that would contribute to improving Super Rider the business.
You know what's funny? I'm actually thinking about this in the complete opposite way right now.
Tell me.
Well, I've actually been sleeping really well, and I've been taking really good care of myself, and I've been, lifting, every other day, and I've been doing all these things to take really great care of myself. And actually, the thing that I'm thinking the most about is like maybe I don't go to bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. Maybe the goal is to put my kids to bed and then go back downstairs and hammer for 2 more hours. Maybe this is the phase where I have to like put the hammer down for a little bit to like get over this hump.
Okay, dude, this is great. Okay, this is like a perfect segue to the whole free trail story because I absolutely nuked my personal health for 3 years now.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to then now recommit to my health.
I'm not
But
saying I'm going to nuke my health.
well,
I'm
but
just
you making
saying,
sacrifices that
yes.
could negatively impact your health.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
I don't know if that's the right answer or not, but I am also, like, starting to run out of time
But the
during.
point is you gotta make sacrifices. It's the
Yeah.
same thing we were talking about a second ago, whether you self-fund the business and you drain your personal bank account or a portion of it in order to fund the business to grow,
Mhm.
or do you take somebody else's money and make the sacrifices that are inherent with that decision? At
Yeah.
some point, you gotta make sacrifices. That's the point.
I think the good news is that you can buy your time back. So instead of staying up 2 hours later, maybe I just hire someone to edit my videos from now on. And instead of actually making money this next year because I will have partners, I just take all that money and shift it into someone who can help me do that. So I maintain my quality of life, but I don't make as much money as I would have.
That's another just crazy delicate balance there.
Yeah.
It's like how much do you reinvest and at what cost?
Yeah. Yeah. This
Another
is
thing that I've learned a lot from my
there's
experience.
so many different ways to go through this because I do feel like I've kind of scratched out a lot of the other things. Like I have merch, I do have a paid option on Substack, I do have a paid option on the YouTube channel, and I do have like a pretty good way forward. One of the things that I'm actually the most interested to explore as the business side of Super Rider is starting to travel a little bit more. So the road trip series was kind of the first step in this process. But what if I could go to a certain location and get paid by a local, tourism board to film there? So there's the
Yeah.
business
We've
there.
talked about this on the
Yeah,
pod a couple times. Yeah.
exactly. But then again, how do you stay congruent with all these things? So if I can develop out the travel side of things, what if I could also go into, more tour based stuff where maybe we offer up like, hey, come ride with us. And not only are we getting paid from tourism, but we could also offer it as something where people could come in and do a 3-day tour of Iceland with me or something, and also, we would be not only getting paid from the tourism board, also selling an opportunity to come ride and do a fun tour, and then making content on top of all of that. So that also is congruent with the travel thing, but it also is another way to sort of like, pay for the filmer, editor, logistics person.
Yeah, well, we're about to have the perfect guest in the adventure tourism world to come assess whether that is the path forward for Super Rider. I'm sure he could give you a lot of good tips there.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
that's awesome, buddy. I mean, you should be proud of how far you've come. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on Super Rider, where you are now, where you go from here.
I just think
But
it's just funny that we're not even talking about bike riding, like, oh yeah, and I'll ride bikes at some point too. It's so much. It's the whole like cobbler's son
dude,
has no shoes, right?
totally. Yeah, when we have Simon Freeman on the pod, who's the publisher of Like the Wind magazine, he's definitely going to be on soon. In fact, I just got my latest issue of Like the Wind. Here it is, sitting next to me here. Anyway, he posted a thing on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago about how, like, the realities of going all in on your passion. And one of the main realities of that is that you stop doing your passion as much. So sacrifices, sacrifices, sacrifices. That's probably the theme of today's show. Should we talk about free trial a little bit?
Yes, please.
All right, so maybe we do this in the same way where I just lay out where are we now and then go from there. As I said at the top, our problems are a lot better now, but we still have problems. And actually, right now, as you know, Aaron, we're sort of in a position where we are fundamentally rethinking our entire business from the ground up. I have always wanted Free Trail to be like this bigger thing, that exists outside of me, that could outlast me, that feels as if there's a large team behind it and that there actually is a large team behind it. In reality, we're very small and we remain small. And I think one of the things that has caused me the most stress and anxiety around Free Trail is that I have always pushed it in that direction of being big. And I'm starting to feel like it's something that the sport just can't sustain. And therefore, if I were to acknowledge that, I'd be going one of two directions. One, I'd be giving up on that dream of having this thing that does feel substantial and that would excite me to work on for the next 10 or 15 years. Or do I celebrate the wins, streamline the business, find efficiency, and make it a really nice cash flowing lifestyle business? And those are sort of the two options I feel like that I have right now. I feel like we've done a lot very well. So going back to what I said to you, some things we've been lucky on, some things we've been good at. What we've been lucky on, especially, was our team. We talked about Ryan, being connected with him at the right time. My wife also works full time on the business. And right now, Freetrail can comfortably sustain 3 full time employees,
which is incredible
which
on
is
its own.
amazing.
That's a huge achievement.
We should celebrate that. And I don't celebrate that enough. It is a huge win. Lutzi, you know our revenue numbers. I'm not going to talk about it publicly, but I'm proud of it. Like I'm proud of where our business is, especially because I did shovel my life savings into it and had years of sleepless nights of wondering whether or not this was going to work.
Yep. Yep. You know,
So
the thing too, just to add on to that, is that no matter what happens competitively or anything else, like you have the option to keep going as long as you want.
yeah,
Where a lot of athletes that didn't take the time and effort to do this thing, it's somebody else's decision when they're done being a sponsored athlete or whatever. And
yeah,
you are now in complete control, which is something to also celebrate. And I think that's something that's important that shouldn't be overlooked.
yeah. So the team, that was sort of a luck thing. Like I happened to marry the right person to occupy the role that Harmony does, and we met Ryan at the perfect time. And then on the skill side, I think we've been good at doing good content and doing other strategic differentiated things. Like, and we found Travis at the right time, who does our fantasy platform, Trail Runner of the Year. We found Jeremy and our partners at Daybreak Racing at the right time, so we are able to own and co-own and operate a couple of races. And I feel like I personally, my greatest strength, even as somebody who has a ton of self-loathing, I think I'm good at vision and overall strategy, and am very bad at implementing those ideas in a way where we can create systems around them and execute against them. But it is important to have vision and ideas, and those are the things that I think we've been good at over time. So we're in a decent spot. Like I said, we have problems, in fact, significant problems that are forcing us to rethink our entire business. But at the end of the day, we are in a good place now, and we expect to remain in a place where this will comfortably, or yeah, at least for the foreseeable future, be able to sustain at least 3 full-time employees. The
I th-
other, go ahead.
I think you have the 3 C's. You have credibility, you have charisma, and you have community. And that's it, man. Like everything else flows downstream from that. But you've built all that stuff up over a very long time. They say that, repetition is reputation. And the fact that you have been doing this as long as you have, and you have done things in a thoughtful, meaningful way, has basically, developed all 3 of those things. And I think, the charisma thing, it's kind of funny, but it's also like, people want to see you. People want to hear your opinions on stuff, including on the free trail unfiltered thing, which is sweet. But like that is a huge thing, and I think sometimes you struggle with that because I've recommended to you many times, like, hey, maybe put another person in your spot for some of these interviews, but you also know that part of your strength is people want to hear what you have to say about this stuff too.
Yeah. Well, thank you, buddy. And yeah, anyway, I definitely am proud of where we are now. The fact is, though, and why I feel like this is an inflection point moment, is that I am way overworked. Way, way, way overworked. Like I work at an intensity that is unsustainable, and that has made me to it has forced me to make sacrifices that I can no longer justify, especially around my health. Like I just mentioned, I'm incredibly unhealthy, incredibly unfit. As somebody who's been a lifelong athlete, it's been hard. And I also, as you know, kind of nuked my own athletic career to pursue this. And I have tackled free trail with the same intensity that I did my running career, and I enjoy doing it. I wouldn't have sacrificed it if I didn't think that inevitably it was going to lead somewhere, that a deep intuition told me it was the right thing to do. But the fact is that I do need to start reinvesting in my own health. I mean, I've had three moments in the last like 4 or 5 months of like crisis level burnout. I need to quit situations, and I just can't keep going like that. So it feels like a crossroads moment for us where we slim down and simplify, or we make a big bet in service of figuring out what is the business and what is the future. So that's a perfect segue to what got you here won't get you there. What is the future? And I should say, we are in a good place. Like, we are sitting on a little bit of cash. It's a good time for us to make a big bet. And we have talked in previous episodes about figuring out what is the business, what is the bottom of the funnel. It can't be just relying on sponsorship and advertising. It needs to be something that you have a little bit more control over, that is a compelling product to the market, to the community. And it's not simple to figure out exactly what that is, but that's where we are. I think another thing that I'll add here, and then I'll pass it back to you, is I had a call with Matt Trappy the other day. I was driving up to Auburn for a Western States board meeting, and we were texting, and I gave him a call, and he used the metaphor of pruning a rose bush. In
Yep.
other words, there's probably things with free trail that we could cut or cut back on significantly that would allow us to focus our time and energy on other things. And so the rosebush metaphor, of course, is like that's how you make the rosebush stronger and grow more healthy.
Yeah.
Just cut things back, focus on what's working, and let that create health in the business. So I've been keeping that in the back of my mind now for the last like 5 days since I talked to Trappy, just contemplating what part of the rose bush needs pruning.
It would be fun to have him on the pod. I love reading that guy's Substack, and
Yeah.
just his thought process is really unique. I like what he writes. So, and he's into second nature, so automatically cool.
Hell yeah.
Um, look, I think like if you're gonna make a big bet, let's just pause for a second and have a real conversation about you and what you actually want to do. Because I think if you made a pro con list of things that, going back to that point that my buddy Riley was talking to me about, of like, what would you do for free and what would you need to be overpaid to do?
Mhm.
I don't, I don't know. Like, I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but do you really want to be at all kinds of events, just like traveling all the time away from home, s- locked in a room for a week straight? Is that the kind of life that you want to have?
No.
And so, let's just like take a giant step from this whole thing, because you've been trying to build a media company, but you're also like this transcendent athlete. And there are athletes who are doing it differently than what you've done. So, just like in everything, there's the pendulum swinging back and forth. And the pendulum for you has swung extremely far in the direction of media company. You actually have this incredible setup and you've got good momentum with everything that you're doing, but I wonder, like, do you think the pendulum could swing just slightly back toward the athlete thing? And what if you made some decisions like an athlete for a little bit? Number one, to get your health back on track, but number two, to do the things that really make you feel happy. And I wonder if there's some things that you could do that wouldn't cost you a ton of time, but would also be potentially beneficial for Free Trail and would also pay into the community. There's a great podcast on Second Nature next Tuesday with Travis Wanlin, where he talks a lot about value add versus value extraction when it comes to community. And it just made me think about all the different things that might add value to the Free Trail community and things that might be really interesting. And I'm just wondering, What if you did something like Camp Free Trail? So instead of you flying all over the world to speak on camera, what if everybody flew to you and spent like 2 or 3 days running up Mount Tam, like doing whatever it is that you do when you're at home, but like really living really high quality days together that involve trail running, that involve just being home, sleeping in your own bed, but you can still do the things that you love, talking about running, running with people and being home with your family. Like that is something that could be a very positive experience for the free trail community, could be a positive experience for you, and you could, have an income without having to leave your house.
All right. When are we doing
So
it?
I guess like where I'm going with this, and this idea I think is something you could probably execute relatively easy. You could partner with, SF Runco or something like that, even to have like a local retail partner. But it's like the essence of the idea is, how can I use this filter of things that I actually want to be doing? This idea of what would I be underpaid to do? Like I would just, yeah, people could come run with me at Mount Tam. I mean, you already do that.
Yep.
Was it every like Wednesday, right?
Yep.
So that could be an interesting thing to add, thing to invest in, big organizational thing, but
Yeah.
also doesn't force you to leave your house and your family and be
And if it
somewhere else.
works, maybe you copy paste it into the adventure tourism model, which we'll again
Yeah.
talk about with somebody here on the podcast very
Yeah.
soon. I don't hate the idea. I mean, it we'd have a lot of math to do about, and we'd have to figure out where people stay and what the itinerary would be, and then therefore what the costs are, what we would have to charge to make it worthwhile. So there would be a lot of work involved in us evaluating, assessing the business model and seeing if it would be
Yeah.
practical, but it's not a bad idea.
I mean, if you're going to invest in something, again, this is coming back to the idea of what do you actually want to do, because
Well, you know
you're
what I want to
successful.
do. You know what I want to do. I mean, I think over time, my goal would be to have Free Trail behave more like a brand than like a media company,
Yeah. Yeah.
selling our own products. And you know where I want to go with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But
With your own products, though, I mean, you could at least do some stuff here. Take a page out of that triathlon life and have, a seasonal drop. I mean, you
totally.
guys, if you're,
Yeah,
if you,
that's the basics.
yeah, like
That's the
anything,
basics.
you just print more of these shirts, like the one I'm wearing right now.
Hell
I,
yeah.
I think you have to have like an always on something
We're
to
working on
offer.
that. We'll have that in like 5 weeks. So,
Excellent. And I think you and I have talked about it, but it's really just like increasing the surface area of ways that people can support you, because not everybody wants to sign up for Free Trail Pro and be, doing all the things you guys offer there, but they still want to support you in some way, shape, or form.
yeah.
And I think you got to give them the opportunities to do exactly that. I've got a couple other ones here. So you talked to me about having partners in like Ryan and everybody. One other thing I would think about, and this is sort of going back to the athlete model, how could you weaponize your partnerships, right? So, for example, on Free Trail, you have uh, a thing where people can sign up for training plans, and if they're a member, they can get it. I think maybe you could tell me more about this, but with the training plans, you have to be Free Trail Pro. But could you just like make them a one-off sale? Like, hey, I'll buy your 20-week 50-mile race plan for $50. But then could you upsell and be like, hey, we'll send you nutrition the entire 20 weeks. And that's a partnership that you could, throw into
Mm,
the feed or whatever else, where, you know, you start to put these pieces together. Or, again, like I'm just going simple with this, but like maybe it's like, we're going to send you gear for the entire 20-week 100K training plan. You're going to get a set of Speedland shoes, and you're going to get a free
yeah.
trail bucket hat or whatever. Like, could you build out some like really easy things, ways for people to support, but also get a lot of value out of what you already have done? Like, you've already made the training plans. So how do you turn that into something that's even more useful? So weaponizing some partners to maybe like help build that out into something. The, I just have one other thing that I kind of want to talk about, and it's this idea of like the top of the funnel. Because this is my opinion, but I think that free trail is very much for the people who are in the know in trail
Right.
running, but
100%.
there's a big opportunity for that top of the funnel to bring people into the sport.
Yep.
And I
Which,
think
if you compare it against Super Rider, you've crushed the top of the funnel. And I would say if we compare the two, you've done better with the top of the funnel. I've done better with the middle of the funnel. Would you
yeah.
say that's accurate?
Oh, so super fair,
Yeah.
super fair. And I think a lot of pro athletes do this exact same thing where they're like, I'm super credible. I can offer this stuff and I'm already sponsored. So I'm just going to keep doing the sponsor model. And that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
I had to build credibility from zero to get to the point that you started from. So I actually feel like I'm just getting to the point that you were like a decade ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
or longer. I don't even know. But
No, it's very true. Like
yeah.
we have done nothing. Like when I said earlier that you're so good at like learning how to do things and then taking that, creating a strategy, and then just like, blasting that strategy consistently in a way that turns a flywheel. We have not been good at that.
So
And I
let
think that's a reflection of my personality.
So if you're going to do a big investment for free trail, here's another option. What if you were to bring in a new face for free trail so it takes some pressure off you so you don't actually have to do all this
So
stuff?
fire myself. Yeah.
Yes,
Keep going. Keep
this is
going.
the goal, right? Like clear space.
Okay. I have a
But
perfect follow up for this, but keep going.
okay, so you're gonna build another personality within Free Trail. You're gonna bring in somebody who has credibility, but they're not as worried about being credible with the already existing trail running community. They are going to help you bring in people from zero to hero. They're
Ah,
going to convert road runners into trail runners. They're going to convert people who've never run before into trail runners, and they're going to give them everything they need to do that process. And they're content that they create for free trail is going to be exactly that. They're going to be just like juicing the algorithm with long and short form content, asking dumb questions that everyone's afraid to answer. That's going to be their job. And that's all they're going to focus on. They are not trying to win a
all right. I love
race.
it. I love it.
Invest in
All
that
right. So
person.
if you're listening to this and you fit that description and you can come be the chief top of the funnel officer here at Free Trail, please do hit me up in Slack or email or whatever. I do like that idea. And it leads me to want to talk about, as I asked you, like, where do you need to up level yourself? Dude, I need a CEO of our company. Like I said, I am really good with brand vision and ideas. I suck at process, structure, systems implementation. I need like an assassin operator. I feel like I would be an amazing number two, is the problem. I feel like I would be an amazing number two to a very smart person. And I feel like I suck as the number one in a lot of ways, but that's very unlikely. But unless, there's somebody in the audience who wants to come be our CEO, please do hit me up. But
Maybe your top of funnel
more
officer can just, like
be the CEO.
everybody's got two jobs at Free Trail, right?
At least. But, more realistically, I probably need to up level myself. Have you seen these like the founder mode memes and stuff?
I haven't, but I'm
Oh,
gonna.
come on, dude. What the hell? What are you doing?
I've been heads down, man.
Anyway, I've been in founder mode too long and I need some support. I need to get better with the finances, people leadership, getting competent at creating systems for the team to follow. What I probably need more is like a number two for me, like a sort of like wingman who could manage social, who could just do a lot of the stuff that takes a lot of time from me and mind space so that I can focus on the value driving things which are in the content creation sphere.
Mhm.
So that's sort of how I feel about what got me here won't get me there. Like I need to up level myself or I need to up level the company in such a way that we can get there, whatever there means.
Yeah, I'm really in favor of you streamlining things to then give yourself a deep breath. I mean, it's like to be super cheesy, this is the aid station where you just take a deep breath and reassess, and maybe you do have to take a 2-hour nap, Dylan.
Yeah.
But, like, I think you need to just get it really streamlined so that you can put the energy into what will get you to the next phase. I've been thinking a lot about that of I got to 100K with Super Rider, but how am I going to get to a million? I am not going to get there by just being a one man show banging out videos once a week. That's not what gets you to a million, at least not within, a reasonable amount of time. And you're right. I need to make some bigger bets and put some risk into it to probably get there, or just completely nuke myself.
Yep.
But I prefer not to.
Well, unfortunately, the things that I want to do are probably the dumb things. I've wanted to have my own magazine for a long time, which would be interesting to add as like part of our subscription product offering. I want my own brand. It would obviously require like a whole team
Yeah,
behind it.
and I feel like you already have your own brand though.
Well,
Like
that's what I mean. Having products that extend the brand into physical space instead of digital.
I just feel like it could be Freetrail and no one would be upset.
That's what I mean, though. But
Yeah.
somebody's got to teach me how to make the product. So, all right. Well, anyway, that was a great therapy session between the two of us. I feel
I
like
f-
we're running too long to go into second nature now, unless you feel like we need to make this a marathon episode. I also have a freaking I need to get this AI stuff off my chest. I have AI stuff that I need to talk about, but maybe we got to save that too.
have you
Uh,
seen have you seen this AI that like takes a website and turns it into a podcast, like two people talking
dude,
back and
that's
forth?
one of the things I was going to talk about.
Somebody sent me, my buddy Garrett sent it to me. He did one for Super Rider, and I was like, this is
All right,
crazy.
let's do the AI quickly before BPC. This will only take me like 2 minutes and
All
you
right.
can respond, then we go to BPC, okay?
Perfect. Yep.
So there's been a few things on the AI front that have melted my brain, a few that have made me feel like, oh, I am totally wasting my time. There's going to be no such thing as content creators and media companies in 5 years. And then I saw something that maybe gave me a little bit of hope. So let's start with the existential, we're all treading water before the robots take all of our jobs. The first thing you just mentioned is called Notebook LM. So you can basically upload a bunch of stuff into this website and it'll spit out what sounds like a totally authentic podcast that will consolidate everything that you have just uploaded in a way that I think its most useful application would be for learning. So, for example, you could download a bunch of PDFs, scientific papers on whatever, carbohydrate metabolism for endurance athletes. And it would spit out a podcast that would teach you everything that was in those research papers that took hundreds of hours to compile. And you could download it into your brain and learn all of it very quickly from a synthetic podcast. Absolutely insane,
Amazing.
and it makes a regular podcast like we're recording now probably feel completely trivial. The next thing, I was listening to Rick Rubin's episode with Shane Smith, the
Oh,
founder
I'm an hour
of
into that
Vice.
one. Yep.
So good, isn't it?
Yep.
I mean, just as a media guy, somebody who's always loved media, Shane Smith, a very interesting character. Say what you will about his behavior over time, it's a worthy podcast to listen to. But what he says is basically like in 5 years, we're all going to be just mainlining synthetic content all day. I mean, that was at least my interpretation of it.
Pretty wild.
And therefore, why keep a human in the loop of the content creation? Also, through second nature, I talked to a guy who's working on an apparel business the other day, and he said he's talking to a company that's working on a startup where effectively you could give this piece of software a prompt about I'm starting, say, a trail running apparel brand, for example. I like this color palette. This is the name. This is the logo. I need these products, a jacket, a long sleeve, some shorts, some socks, and it will fricking spit out a tech pack that you could then take to a manufacturer to make your stuff. So my hypothesis is, Lucy, it's going to be as easy to start a brand as it is to start a podcast in the next 5 years,
That's
which
crazy.
means this macro trend of institutions to individuals is only going to get crazier, right? We've obviously seen it like in media where NBC News is irrelevant compared to Mr. Beast, right? And we've seen it now with brands. We talk all the time about these up and comer brands. So this is only going to make the challenger brands more abundant and therefore probably more competitive. So anyway, crazy, crazy stuff on the AI front that makes me think that like we're heading towards a wild, wild future where basically every single person's going to have their own brand. But okay, here's our point of optimism here. I follow that guy Corey Malley on LinkedIn, who we talked about on the podcast as it related to like stuck culture a little while ago, and he posted something. This came from a Twitter account. It's not his original idea, but what this Twitter account said is AI accidentally proved the existence of the human soul by showing us what art looks like without one. So maybe there's a glimmer of hope in that we as humans with human souls will be able to see through the synthetic data and understand that there isn't a human soul behind it and therefore maybe connect with it less, meaning that we might still have jobs in 5 years. What do you think, Lucy?
I think that for all that AI is, there are ways where AI optimizes, and it has always been like that. There have always been things like the calculator on your phone is technically that, right? It optimizes things that need to be optimized, but the stuff that means stuff is still made by real people, and I think that that only becomes more meaningful as things get more optimized. As AI grows, meaning is important, experiences are important, and now because everything's so optimized, you're going to have time to go experience stuff, and that sounds pretty great to me. I think that, like what we're talking about here, of like, what if we did camp free trail where we all go hang out and run up a hill together? AI can't do that.
Right.
You want to go mountain biking with me in Iceland? AI can't do
But
that.
what is the future free trail use as the top of the funnel? A bunch of synthetic content in order to get a community that would come to Camp Free Trail? That's the problem.
It's optimization at that point. And yeah, maybe. I mean, but again, I think especially when it comes to podcasts, people still I listened to the Notebook LM thing and I was like, okay, I get it, but like you talked about like the parasynthetic relationship or parasocial relationship. I want to know that that's a person. Like I want to have a connection with that person. I want to be engaged in the rest of their program, not just the words that they're saying on the podcast. I care about that. I mean, the fact that people listen to us riff on our own businesses for the last hour means that they probably care about more than just the news in the outdoor industry, right?
Oh. Well, you're always prone to look on the optimistic side. I'm always prone to look on the pessimistic side. Part of me feels like we're heading into a very strange place where there is just going to be a fire hose of synthetic content that we're going to be competing against. Obviously, the content game is low moat anyway. There's already an abundance of YouTube channels and podcasts and stuff. It's already hard to differentiate. This may make it impossible to differentiate, but I do think that there's a point here where you can, in most cases, grok the fact that there isn't a human soul on the other side of the stuff that AI blasts out.
Yep. And we have a running start on all these AI groups. We've been doing Second Nature for, I think this is episode 40. So
What?
we got 40 episodes under our belt. You've had Free Trail for years. I've had Super Rider for years. We've got momentum. We've got a head start on all these, AI things. So let them try to catch us.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, that was our little AI corner. It's been 40 episodes and we haven't talked about artificial intelligence yet. So we come around to it. Let's hope there's still room for humans here in the outdoor industry. Let's go to BPC. You get us started, Lucy.
Ooh, I got one for you. I hope you like this. You know that brand Commensal, the bike
Yes,
brand that you
that
fell in
was
love
my
with
BPC. Yeah.
in Austria? Okay, on their channel, they launched an hour-long film with Killian Braun. Now, Killian Braun, to give you a little bit of context, is a Commencal mountain bike athlete, and he's famous for riding these really sketchy high mountain lines where it looks like he could fall off a cliff if he took a wrong turn. Basically, that's
Okay.
like how he built this gigantic following on Instagram and YouTube, is by doing basically like really, really treacherous mountain bike trails that make your palms sweat when you watch it. They just put out a film where he rides and sort of does that, but it's an hour-long film, and it's so beautifully shot, and it's the story of them tackling 10 peaks in the Dolomites, and it's beautiful. It's so cool. Like, you don't have to be a mountain biker to be able to appreciate this dude just ripping awesome mountain lines. And I was wondering, are there is there something in trail running that does this, or is it all competitive films? Because I've seen plenty of FKT attempt films. I've seen plenty of race, coverage where there's story, but is anybody doing stuff just for the sake of doing it?
I mean, what do you mean? Like just charging down a mountainside and creating a film about it? Because the
Yeah,
answer would be no
why
there.
not? I just think that's so cool. Like, why does it always have to be about competition and about winning stuff when most people aren't actually running to race? They're just out there in nature, just living the dream.
Right. I mean, it goes back to my BPC from last week about Rivendell and the fact that they've built the whole brand around the idea that it's the activity of riding the bike that matters. It's not your aero position, your aero helmet, the price of your carbon fiber frame, the, watts that you put out, your strength to weight ratio. It's about just riding the bike. It doesn't matter what you're wearing, just go ride your bike. So,
I need a Ricky Gates style film about trail running.
okay.
But like set in some beautiful mountains, or I don't know, whatever.
But
But
I guess I need to watch this film, but like, are you envisioning just something where like you go to Iceland or whatever? Because I think I recall something with Carson where he was like in Iceland and it was just like him just blasting down these pumice slopes on his mountain bike.
oh,
I
that
mean,
one was you're thinking of North of Nightfall, where they went to the farthest north island in the world, basically, and ripped down mountain lines. Yeah.
yeah. So is
There's
this
always like a
Commensal video like it's an hour long and what are they like what's the deal?
it's just
It's
like a
not racing, it's not FKTs, it's just they're out riding.
just a project. It's like a project film. Just this idea of like, hey, let's go ride these like 10 really cool peaks. And every single one requires at least 1,000 feet of climbing to get to, or maybe it's 1,000 meters. But either way, like, I love this idea of there's just a story. Like, it's a bunch of dudes going out, filming these incredible lines. It's like beautiful, well
Okay.
shot, cool, exciting, aspirational.
All right, then I have the idea that Ryan and I have been kicking around for a little while. We jump in an Amtrak train in Seattle or San Francisco or something like that, and we take it all the way to Boston or something like that over the course of call it a week or 2 weeks, and stop off in a bunch of different places and just go for trail runs.
That'd be amazing.
And meanwhile, we're just chilling in the train, hanging out, being dudes. You
I
into
think
that?
I'm into it. I'd watch that.
Can we count on you to be an executive producer?
I will see you at the Portland Amtrak
All
stop.
right, there we go.
I
All
just
right.
love the idea of like the project style film, and it doesn't have to be a competitive thing every single time.
Yeah, okay. All right, my BPC, go listen to Shane Smith on Rick Rubin's podcast. That's a no-brainer. Very, very interesting, especially those who work in the creative field and in media who are creators themselves. Shane Smith built Vice into a multi-billion dollar company. Unfortunately, they're like in bankruptcy or coming out of bankruptcy now. There's a big case study as it relates to media businesses and execution over decades. But the fact is that Shane Smith is one of the most consequential media people of the last 30 years. And like I said, he does have a checkered past. I mean, there's rumors of his debaucherous behavior during his tenure at Vice, but still very interesting. But my real BPC, I just think this is interesting. It was launched a couple weeks ago. The North Face launched a shoe called the Summit Series Off Trail. So if you look it up, It's just this super technical looking shoe that is specifically made for off trail terrain. So what you would probably associate with like high alpine, very technical. If you look at the shoe, you can see it's aggressive in terms of its the lug sizes. There's sort of a booty. It has a boa fit system on it. And the reason I wanted to bring this up because I think it's just interesting strategically because obviously this shoe is not a volume driver. Like I would guess they maybe will sell 1,000 of those, maybe a couple thousand at the most globally. But maybe what it does is establish their credibility at the top of the mountain, right? And have that aspirational quality and a product that represents it in a way that is attractive to the most hardcore athletes and that may trickle down to the average consumer as well. Even if they're not in the market for this particular shoe, they may see it and think, wow, the North Face makes some very technical footwear. So I don't know, an interesting potential loss leader for the brand in the footwear department. And I think just an interesting looking product that is novel. You know, nobody has made a shoe specifically for off trail use until the North Face did. So kind of interesting and differentiated, even if it is not going to be a big profit driver for them.
This is a wild looking shoe. I'm looking at it
Yeah.
right now. This is crazy looking.
Yeah.
It's cool to see. I feel like North Face has got a lot of stuff up their sleeve right now. You saw the new ad campaign that just dropped, and you see stuff like this popping out. Obviously, they've got Katie Scheid absolutely crushing it. A lot of really interesting stuff kind of going on over there. And as we know, a lot of this stuff doesn't just happen in weeks or months. This is stuff that's been brewing for quite some time. I'm really curious to see what the next year or two looks like for TNF.
Yeah. My buddy Josh Rosenthal, who I mentioned on the last podcast, who's building that app for groups to connect through running, on his podcast just had on uh, a guy who's like kind of the leading trail running footwear reviewer who reviews for Believe in the Run. And he said the North Face is the most underrated footwear brand in trail right now because it's so associated with apparel. And we've documented the history of TNF footwear, both on the Freetrail platform and here. But anyway, they're definitely making interesting footwear now.
So
And
cool.
go check out Jean-Marc Dejean, who's now at Satisfy. He was just on the Freetrail podcast. He's the guy who I'm sure led this initiative of the TNF off trail prior to his departure.
So cool.
Anyway, holy smokes, was that our longest episode ever, Aaron?
By a lot.
Jeez. All right. Well, thanks to our listeners for being here. I think we're gonna forego an intro on this episode to make it a little bit cleaner, but make sure you go follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube. Join the Slack. The Slack has been freaking fire. So if you're really interested to connect in a deeper way with ourselves and other like-minded individuals, go check it out in the
And
show
if,
notes.
and if you really love us, subscribe to us on YouTube and watch the podcast on your TV so we get mega watch time and we can actually get that channel monetized. We're at like 700 subscribers right now. So if you really love us, just put us on your TV with YouTube and just let it play. You can listen to us. You don't have to look at us, but just listen. That's the right way to actually engage with us and help us grow.
And leave a comment, right, Aaron?
That would also be ideal, but the TV watch time is pretty clutch for us. And yeah, it's sort of like a newer trend that's happening, but it's actually the most meaningful way to help us grow this because YouTube, again, it's an algorithm. Like it's hard to grow on a podcast, but YouTube is actively sending out each one of these podcasts to more people. So that's how you help us grow. Unless you want to keep blasting us on LinkedIn, that's cool too.
Yeah.
But
all right. If you want to be the CEO of Freetrail, also just email me. Oh, all right. Great episode, Aaron. Good to see you, buddy. Thanks to our listeners for being here. We'll talk to you again very soon.